Why were the boots already lined at the door if she hadn't even decided to leave? The barracks smelled faintly of dust and oil, of uniforms washed too often and air too heavy with silence. She sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows pressed into her knees, staring at the boots like they belonged to someone else. The transport was waiting. Her papers had been signed. She was supposed to be on that convoy back to the airfield before sunset. But her hands wouldn't move. Her orders said return to base. Her gut said not yet. Outside, the wind carried a low hum of machinery, generators, a chopper cutting across the horizon, voices drifting, men and women moving with purpose, clipped conversations about maps, about fuel, about ammunition. Life moved on without her decision. The mission she'd bled for was winding down, and she was being sent home. She should have been relieved. She should have felt lucky. But the thought of walking away now gnawed at her chest like betrayal. Someone knocked on the metal frame of the bunkhouse door. "You packed?" Sergeant Mendez's voice was casual, but his eyes lingered longer than they should. He was older, scar across his temple, a man who'd seen too many deployments to pretend anymore. She forced a small nod, almost. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Don't take too long. Convoy's rolling in 20. His boots clicked away before she could answer. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to choose between walking out with her duffel and leaving something undone, or staying and not knowing what it would cost her. Her eyes drifted to the photograph taped inside her locker, a faded picture of a girl, maybe 6 years old, smiling through a missing tooth. Her daughter. The photo had edges curled from heat and time, but it was the only piece of home she carried. She whispered under her breath, almost as if the photo could hear her. Just a little longer. But she knew she was lying. The mission wasn't finished, not for her. At the mess tent, the air was thick with fried onions and the chatter of soldiers pretending everything was normal. She kept her head down, moving through the line, tray in hand. A few glanced at her, some nodded respectfully, others avoided her eyes. Rumors traveled faster than bullets out here. They knew she'd been pulled. They knew she was supposed to go home. "Guess she's finally getting out," one voice muttered from a nearby table. She didn't turn, she didn't need to. She sat by herself, stirring the food she wouldn't eat. Her stomach was a knot, her throat dry despite the water. Every scrape of fork against metal, every burst of laughter from the far side of the tent, felt louder than it should. She wanted to vanish. But then across the tent she caught sight of something. A folded map being passed quietly between two men she didn't recognize. They weren't part of her unit, contractors maybe, or something else. Their eyes darted around, careful, too careful. Her chest tightened. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe no one else cared. She set down her tray, heart ticking faster. Was it paranoia or instinct? She'd learned to trust instinct. Out here, it was the only thing that kept you alive. The men disappeared before she could move. But the image stuck, the edge of that map, the markings in red. Something wasn't finished here. The convoy engines rumbled outside. She stood by the bunk again, duffel strap in her hand. Her boots finally laced, her weapon already cleaned and locked. Mendez came by one last time. "You're up." She nodded but didn't move. "Look, I know what this is," he said, softer now. "I've seen it before. You think you owe them something, you think leaving makes you weak, but you've done enough, more than enough. Don't let this place eat you alive." His words dug under her skin, but they didn't change the weight pressing on her ribs. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to walk out and let it all end here. But she couldn't shake the picture of that map. She couldn't shake the feeling. When Mendez walked away, she didn't follow. She stayed in the silence until the engines roared, until the convoy rolled out, until the dust settled back into the ground. Her boots remained planted. She wasn't leaving, not yet. That night the camp seemed different, quieter, But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that pressed in heavy like a storm waiting behind the horizon. She walked the perimeter slowly, her rifle slung, the moonlight silvering the barbed wire. Shadows stretched long across the sand, shapes shifting with every gust of wind. Her mind replayed the image of the map, the way the men's hands folded it quickly, the glance over their shoulders. Something about it clung to her nerves. She found herself near the comms tent. Inside, a radio crackled low voices, coded chatter. She paused, listening. Nothing unusual, not enough to hold her. She kept moving, but her stomach twisted tighter with each step. She thought of her daughter again, 6 years old, a life untouched by sand and blood and silence, a life she wanted to protect even from across an ocean. Maybe that was why she couldn't leave. Maybe that was why her chest burned when she thought of home, because if something unfinished here reached home, if someone else's child paid the price, then she'd never forgive herself. Her boots carried her back toward the center of camp, toward the dim lights of the command tent. She hesitated at the entrance. Inside, voices. A low argument. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was sharp. She lingered just long enough to hear a phrase drift through the canvas. Not supposed to know. Her breath caught. The voices lowered again, muffled. She stepped back into the shadows before anyone saw her. Her mind raced, not supposed to know what, who wasn't supposed to know. She realized with a cold weight sinking in her gut that she was standing at a threshold. Either she walked away now, let the mystery die here in the desert, or she stayed. And if she stayed, she'd be walking into something she might not come back from. Her fingers brushed the photo in her pocket. She closed her eyes. And she stayed. Dawn bled slow across the sky, painting the horizon in pale fire. The camp stirred, soldiers pulling gear, making coffee, joking too loudly to cover the fatigue. She stood alone near the watchtower, the wind tugging strands of hair loose beneath her cap. Her eyes scanned the distance, but her thoughts were miles away. Why was she still here? Because something was wrong. Because no one else seemed to see it. Because walking away now felt like abandoning the oath she'd taken, the sacrifices she'd made, the ghost she carried. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't trying to be. She just couldn't leave unfinished work behind. And deep down she knew. The mission wasn't over. Not yet. Why did the faces around her suddenly look like strangers? Morning light spilled over the desert outpost, painting the tents and vehicles in a dull gold. Dust rose with every step, catching the sun like scattered sparks. The camp moved as if nothing was wrong, boots stomping, radios crackling, orders barked across open ground. Yet to her everything felt tilted, slightly off. She sat with a tin cup of bitter coffee, the kind that never cooled and never tasted right, her fingers wrapped so tight around it that the metal pressed into her skin. Across the mess tent, the two men she'd noticed last night weren't there. Their absence dug at her thoughts like a loose thread. Where had they gone? Why were they here at all? Her tray sat untouched. She forced down a swallow, but the taste stuck in her throat. When she looked up, Mendez was watching her from another table. He didn't smile, didn't look away, just studied her with the kind of weight only older soldiers carried, the weight of knowing too much. She lowered her eyes first. The coffee sloshed as her hand trembled. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that map folding into hands too careful, too rehearsed. Every time she drifted near rest, she heard the words echo through canvas, not supposed to know. And every time, she woke with her daughter's face in her mind. Later in the motor pool, the sun climbed higher, burning the metal of parked vehicles until it hurt to touch. She moved between them, checking bolts, hoods, rifles slung across shoulders. Routine, ordinary, the kind of work that kept hands busy and thoughts elsewhere. Except her thoughts refused to leave her alone. She noticed Private Harris, a kid barely 20, fumbling with a wrench, sweat streaking down his face. His lips pressed tight, but she caught the way his hands shook. "You okay?" she asked. He startled, eyes darting to her. "Yes, ma'am, just heat, that's all." But she saw the truth. Fear, not of her, not of the heat, something else. "You're new," she said softly. He nodded once. "First tour." She crouched, steadying the wrench with her hand. "Then listen. Don't pretend you're fine when you're not. This place doesn't reward liars." For a moment his eyes glistened with something he fought to swallow down. I thought it'd feel different. I thought I'd be braver than this." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him bravery wasn't about what you felt. It was about what you did anyway. But the words caught because she wasn't sure she still believed them herself. Instead, she said, "You'll learn." She left him with the wrench, but his voice stayed with her. "I thought I'd be braver." So had she. By afternoon, the desert heat was merciless. She found herself near the perimeter fence, watching mirages ripple across the horizon. The sky pressed heavy, cloudless, without relief. Her radio crackled, static popping, then a voice. "Convoy Charlie, 10 mics out." She froze. The convoy, the one she was supposed to be on. Dust plumes smudged the horizon in the distance. Trucks rolling, carrying those headed back to base. She should have been among them, boots on metal floor, duffel at her feet, home drawing closer with every mile. Instead she stood rooted, sweat dripping, rifle heavy at her side. As the convoy approached, something pricked at the edge of her vision. Movement, too far, too faint, a flicker in the heat waves. She squinted. There, beyond the convoy, a ridge cutting sharp against the sky, shadows shifting, figures or tricks of the desert. Her pulse kicked. She raised her scope, steady hands, trained eyes. Through the shimmer, shapes clarified. 4, 5, maybe more, not part of the convoy, positioned on the ridge, rifles cradled. Ambush. Her throat closed. She slammed her radio. "Command, this is Outpost Delta, eyes on ridge, possible hostile positions. Convoy Charlie is walking into it. Do you copy?" Static hissed, then "Copy Delta, stand by." But there was no time. The convoy rolled closer, unknowing. Her body moved before thought. She dropped prone in the sand, rifle steady, breath shallow, sight on target. The familiar tunnel vision narrowing the world to crosshairs and trigger weight. She fired one shot, the first figure dropped, chaos erupted on the ridge. The convoy jolted, engines revving, drivers realizing too late. Bullets spat down from the ridge. Shouts filled the radio, screams cut across the air. She fired again, and again. Rhythm, control, heart pounding but hands calm. Years of training collapsing into seconds of instinct. Voices burst through comms, panic, commands, confusion. But all she heard was her own heartbeat and the whisper in her head, "Not yet. You can't leave yet." When it ended, the desert fell back into silence. Acrid smoke clung to the air. Convoy trucks pulled through, battered but moving. Bodies lay on the ridge, motionless against the sand. Her cheek still pressed against the rifle stock, sweat slick on her skin. Her lungs burned. She'd just saved them. But no one had asked her to. Slowly, she lowered her weapon. She could feel eyes on her from the watchtower, from the ground, from soldiers who hadn't known she was even watching. Some looked at her with awe, others with unease. Mendez's voice came through the comms, ragged. "Delta, confirm sniper's name. Who the hell?" He stopped, he knew. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself up. This was why she hadn't left. This was what her gut had warned. But the deeper truth struck harder. If that ambush had been waiting, then someone had known the convoy route. Someone inside. Her stomach knotted. The map, the voices, not supposed to know. It wasn't over, it had just begun. That night she couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. She walked the camp in circles, boots grinding dust into the ground. Everywhere she looked, soldiers moved like ghosts. Shadows clung longer than they should. Harris stopped her once, his eyes wide. "You saved them today. They'd all be gone without you." She nodded but said nothing. Because she didn't feel like a savior. She felt like someone who'd stepped into a storm no one else wanted to see. Mendez found her near the tower. His voice was low, tired. "You should have been on that convoy." She kept her gaze on the dark horizon. "You disobeyed direct orders," he continued. "I saved lives," she said flatly. His silence stretched. Finally he sighed. "That you did." The words carried no comfort. Because beneath them, she heard what he didn't say. "You also just painted a target on your back." She turned to him, eyes sharp. "You ever hear the phrase 'not supposed to know'?" His face tightened, subtle but there. Her chest went cold. He didn't answer. He just walked away. Alone again, she lifted the photo from her pocket. Her daughter's smile blurred as her eyes stung. She whispered into the night, voice cracking, "I can't come home yet, not until it's finished." The desert wind carried the words away. But the silence that followed made a promise. The mission wasn't about survival anymore. It was about truth. And she wasn't ready to let go until she found it. Why was everyone suddenly so quiet around her? The outpost felt different in daylight, though nothing had changed. Same tents flapping in the desert wind. Same armored vehicles baking in the sun. Same soldiers trudging through routines. But the glances, those had changed. She caught them in her periphery. A second too long. A silence where there used to be words. They all knew. Not just about the convoy, about her. She sipped stale water from her canteen, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. Saving those trucks had bought her respect in some corners, suspicion in others. Neither sat comfortably. When she passed Harris near the comms tent, he tried to smile. "Morning, ma'am." She managed a nod, but she could see it in his eyes, the way all tangled with unease. Like he wasn't sure if she was the reason people lived or the reason they nearly died. And deep down, she wondered the same. Inside the briefing hut, maps sprawled across the table, routes marked in red, circles where danger lurked. Officers leaned over, voices low and clipped. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she drifted close enough to hear. No way they knew unless someone gave it to them. Her pulse quickened. Another voice, calm but sharp. "We lock it down. No leaks, no chatter. Last thing we need is panic." She stepped into the doorway, shadows stretching with her. The men looked up, startled. "You think it was a leak?" she asked. Silence pressed down. One officer cleared his throat. "That's not for you to worry about. You're rotation out, aren't you?" Her jaw clenched. "Convoy was mine, that makes it my worry." The officer didn't flinch, but his eyes hardened. "Stand down, soldier." The words landed like a slap. Soldier, not by name, not by rank, just a problem to be dismissed. She turned without another word. But her heart hammered. They were hiding something. By midday, heat shimmered over the sand. She sat in the shadow of a supply truck, rifle across her knees, eyes scanning the horizon. But her mind wasn't on the desert. It was replaying voices, faces, half-finished sentences. Not supposed to know. She thought of her daughter again. The photo was soft at the edges now, almost falling apart. She pressed it flat against her thigh, imagining the tiny voice on the other end of phone calls that always ended too soon. "Mom, when are you coming home?" The answer never changed. Soon. But what was soon? She whispered it aloud, voice barely a breath. "I should have been on that convoy." The guilt burned. She could have been closer to home by now. One step nearer to arms waiting across an ocean. Instead, she sat in heat and silence, clinging to shadows of truth. But every time she pictured leaving, she saw the ridge, the figures waiting, the rifles aimed at unsuspecting lives. And she knew she couldn't, not yet. That night she moved like a ghost, past sleeping tents, past muted laughter by the generators, toward the comms hut. Her boots made no sound in the sand. Her breath shallow, steady. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, only that she'd know it when she found it. Inside, the hum of equipment filled the air. Radios stacked, wires tangled. A corporal sat with headphones on, scribbling notes. His eyes flicked up when she entered. "Need something?" he asked. She forced a calm smile. "Water refill, thought I'd grab it here." He gestured absently toward the canister. His focus slipped back to the radio. She moved slowly, filling her canteen, but her eyes scanned the desk, logs stacked in neat piles, messages transcribed, incoming, outgoing. Her fingers brushed one sheet as if steadying herself. She read just enough. "Convoy Charlie, departure confirmed, route coordinates." Her throat went dry. Why was that written here? Transmission logs should have been sealed, restricted, not lying open on a desk. She looked at the corporal, too young, too distracted, probably not his decision. But someone wanted those routes recorded where they could be seen. She tucked the thought away like a loaded round. "Thanks," she murmured, slipping out. The night swallowed her again. Sleep didn't come. She sat on her bunk, rifle propped against the frame, the photo pressed flat between her palms. Her mind wrestled. If she stayed, she risked disappearing into a mission no one wanted her on. If she left, she risked betraying the oath she lived by. Her daughter's eyes seemed to ask the question she couldn't answer. "Why are you still there?" She whispered into the darkness. "Because someone's lying, and if I don't find out who, more people die." Her voice broke on the last word. But the silence answered back, cold and final. The following day, the heat came early. She found herself near the motor pool again, the smell of oil sharp in her nose. Harris was there, crouched under a truck, grease smeared across his face. "Need a hand?" she asked. He jolted, smacking his head on the undercarriage. "No, ma'am, I mean yes, always." She knelt, taking the wrench, steadying the bolt. "You learn faster if you don't try to do it all alone." He glanced at her, uncertain. Then quietly, "Is it true about the ambush, that someone gave them the route?" Her hand stilled. "Where'd you hear that?" "People talk, can't stop it. Half the camp saying it was a leak. Half saying it was just luck." Her chest tightened. "And what do you think?" He swallowed hard. "I think you don't save people like that unless you know more than they do." Their eyes met, young and old, fear and experience. She wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to tell him she didn't know anything for certain, that she was chasing shadows, that she was terrified of what she might find. But instead she said, "Keep your eyes open, Harris. Don't believe everything you hear." And she walked away. Because some truths were too heavy for him to carry. At dusk, she stood near the fence line again. The desert stretched endless, the sky bruised purple and gold. Wind cut through wire. Behind her, voices rose in the command tent. She couldn't make out words, but she could hear tone, urgent, clipped, almost angry. She took a step closer. "Can't let her stay here." Her pulse spiked. Already seen too much. She pressed herself against the shadow of the canvas, every nerve burning. "One more slip, and it's on all of us." She closed her eyes. They weren't talking about the ambush. They were talking about her. When the voices died, she stayed in the dark a long time, the desert pressing close. The truth sharpened, undeniable now. Someone inside didn't want her there. Not because she disobeyed, not because she was reckless. Because she was close. Closer than they wanted. She gripped the photo tight in her fist until her knuckles burned. And for the first time, she admitted the thought aloud, voice shaking into the desert night. "I may not make it home." The wind carried the words away. But her heart knew them now. And the mission no longer felt like duty. It felt like destiny. Why did the laughter stop the second she walked in? The mess tent had always been loud, spoons clattering, trays scraping, jokes told too loudly just to cut the silence of the desert. But tonight, the sound seemed to collapse as she pushed through the canvas flap. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Voices dipped. Eyes shifted. She froze, the tray in her hand heavier than it should have been. They knew. Not everything, maybe. Not enough to point fingers, but enough to know she didn't belong here anymore. Not as just another soldier, not as someone headed home. She was something else now, something they couldn't name. She set her tray down at an empty table. The food steamed, bland and gray. Her stomach twisted. Conversations resumed around her, but softer. She caught fragments. Convoy, sniper, orders. She pressed her palms to the metal table, grounding herself. It wasn't paranoia, not anymore. Someone wanted her gone. Later, in the dim wash of floodlights, she walked the perimeter again. The desert smelled of iron and dust. The horizon stretched endless, the stars sharp against the black. She let the silence steady her pulse, but inside the weight pressed harder. She thought of her daughter, her voice on the phone, small but stubborn. "You promised you'd be at my birthday this time." And her own voice breaking. "I'll try, I swear I'll try." But trying wasn't enough. Not here, not when shadows pressed so close. She pulled the photo from her pocket, fingers brushing its worn edges. What if she never made it back? What if this mission, the one no one else admitted existed, swallowed her whole? She shoved the thought down. Not now, not yet. By morning, she was at the motor pool again, sweat dripping as she helped Harris wrestle with a jammed axle. The kid looked exhausted. His hands trembled more than before. "You're running on fumes," she said. He forced a grin. "Aren't we all?" But she saw the crack in his mask. "Harris," she said softly, "who do you talk to when you can't sleep?" His smile faltered. "No one. You can't talk out here, not about that stuff." "You can talk to me," she offered. For a moment he looked like he might, but then his gaze darted over her shoulder and he shut down. "I should get this fixed." She turned, following his glance. Mendez stood by the edge of the pool, arms crossed, watching. She straightened. "Something on your mind, Sergeant." He shrugged, but his eyes lingered. Too long, too heavy. Then he walked away without a word. Her chest tightened. Was he protecting her or watching her? That afternoon, orders came down for another supply run. Short convoy, low risk. She wasn't assigned. Still, she lingered by the gate as the trucks rolled out, engines growling. Dust swallowed them. Something in her gut twisted. She climbed the tower, took her scope, scanned the horizon long after the convoy disappeared. The desert shimmered, heat rising like smoke, nothing. And yet she couldn't shake it. Her radio hissed once, then silence. Static. Her grip tightened. She stayed at her post until night fell, the convoy returning battered but intact. Relief washed through her, but also something colder. Because she'd been waiting for it. Expecting it. And the fact that nothing had happened only proved one thing. Whoever had given away the first route wasn't finished. They were waiting. That night she slipped back into the comms tent. The corporal was gone this time, headphones hanging on the chair. Radios hummed, green lights blinking. Logs stacked where she'd seen them before. She flipped through quickly, scanning lines. Dates, coordinates, departure times. Her breath caught. Convoy Charlie's route, the ambushed one, was listed twice. 2 sets of coordinates, slightly different. One marked command, the other transmit. Someone had altered it. Deliberately. Her chest burned. She shoved the log back, careful, quiet. But as she turned, a shadow shifted in the doorway. She froze. Mendez stood there. For a moment, neither spoke. His face unreadable. Finally, he said, "You're going to get yourself killed." Her throat tightened. So it's true, someone inside leaked it. He didn't move, didn't deny. She stepped closer. Who? Silence stretched. Then he said, low and sharp, "You don't want to know." Her stomach dropped. He walked past her, brushing the canvas flap aside, leaving her in the hum of radios and the weight of truth half-spoken. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath. Not supposed to know. The words echoed louder now. Back at her bunk, she sat in the dark duffel untouched at her feet. Her rifle leaned against the wall, silent and steady. She should have been gone, home safe. Instead, she was trapped between shadows, her own guilt, her daughter's voice, and the knowledge that someone she trusted had blood on their hands. She pressed the photo to her lips, eyes burning. "I'll come home," she whispered, "but not until I know." The desert outside stirred, wind rattling the tent walls, as if the night itself warned her. The closer she got, the more dangerous it would become. The next day, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The soldiers laughed too loud. The officers spoke too carefully. Even Harris seemed to avoid her eyes. Every face was a mask now. She walked through camp like a ghost, every glance weighing her down. Because she knew one thing for certain. The enemy wasn't just outside the wire. The enemy was here. With her. Watching. Waiting. And she had no idea who it was. The desert wasn't silent tonight. The wind carried whispers through the canvas, tugging at the edges of her sleep until her eyes snapped open. For a moment, she lay still, the faint rasp of breathing around her bunks blending with the hum of the generators. Then she heard it, footsteps. Not the casual shuffle of someone half awake. These were deliberate, careful. She eased upright, hand finding the grip of her rifle. Her bunk creaked softly. No one stirred. Whoever was outside wasn't supposed to be. She slipped her boots on and ducked out, the night air slapping her awake. The camp was bathed in floodlight glow, harsh and white against the sand. Shadows stretched long between the vehicles. She caught the tail of a figure moving fast near the comms tent. Her pulse spiked. She followed. The flap of the tent rustled as she eased it aside. Inside, the air hummed with static. Radios blinked in green and amber. And someone bent over the logs. She recognized the outline instantly, Harris. Her relief was quick, but so was suspicion. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He jumped, nearly knocking the binder to the floor. His eyes darted wide in the glow. I couldn't sleep," he stammered. "I heard something, thought I'd check." She stepped closer, her boots thudding softly. "Check what?" His hands shook as he fumbled with the papers. "Roots. I just wanted to see." "Why?" He froze, couldn't answer. Her stomach knotted. "Harris, did you change the logs?" "No," his voice cracked too high. "I swear no, I didn't." But his eyes told a different story. She reached past him, grabbing the binder, flipped through. And there it was. Today's convoy route, 2 versions again. One marked command, one marked transmit. "Proof." Her throat went dry. She lifted her gaze back to him. "Tell me the truth." He shook his head violently. "It's not me, you don't understand. They told me if I did." Her breath caught. "They who?" Before he could answer, the canvas ripped open behind them. Mendez. His silhouette filled the doorway, broad and still. His eyes locked on her, then the binder in her hands. And in that instant she knew. The bottom dropped out of her chest. Not Harris, not fully. It was him. The air in the tent crackled like gunpowder waiting for a spark. Mendez stepped in slowly, hands loose at his sides, but his gaze sharp enough to cut. "Put it back," he said quietly. Her fingers tightened on the binder. "You've been covering it up," she said, voice low, "all this time." He didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. Instead, he looked at Harris. "Get out." The kid froze. Now his hands really shook. Mendez, she started. Now he barked. Harris bolted, slipping past him into the night. Leaving her alone. She shifted her stance, weight-balanced, rifle between them. Why? She demanded. Mendez exhaled, slow and heavy, like the question itself bored him. Because orders don't come from here, he said. They come from higher, higher than you, higher than me. Her heart slammed. You sold us out. He tilted his head. No, I followed orders. Her grip on the rifle shook. Orders got them killed. Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You weren't supposed to see this, he said. The words made her skin crawl. Not supposed to know, she whispered. And there it was, confirmation. The phrase she'd been haunted by wasn't paranoia. It was real. He stepped closer. You can still walk away, take your duffel, go home, pretend you never saw. Her throat burned. Home, her daughter, the promise she'd made. For a heartbeat, the temptation cut deep. But then she saw the photo in her mind, edges worn from her pocket. She heard the silence after convoy Charlie never returned. She leveled the rifle. I can't, she said. His eyes narrowed. The air went taut, like a wire pulled to breaking. Then shouts outside, boots pounding. Harris's voice panicked, help in here. She cursed under her breath. Mendez moved first, lunged. She yanked the rifle up, but he slammed into her. The binder flew, scattering pages across the floor. Radios clattered. They grappled, his strength crushing, hers desperate. She jammed an elbow into his ribs. He grunted. She twisted, breaking free just enough to get the rifle between them. The canvas flap burst open. Soldiers poured in, rifles raised. And in that frozen second, she realized how it looked. She was armed. Mendez was bleeding. And the proof lay shredded at their feet. Drop it, someone shouted. Her chest heaved. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Mendez's eyes locked on hers, cold and steady. He didn't need to say it. He'd already won. Because to everyone else, she was the problem now. The paranoid one, the soldier who couldn't let go. And if she didn't make a move fast, she'd be silenced before the truth ever reached daylight. Her grip tightened, her breath ragged. One choice. Run or fight. Either way, the desert had just swallowed her whole. The rifles didn't waver. Muzzles glared at her like unblinking eyes, the metal gleaming under the floodlights that leaked through the canvas. She stood frozen, her breath sharp in her chest, the weight of her weapon like fire in her hands. Her instinct screamed run, her training screamed hold. But her heart whispered choose. She dropped the rifle. The thud on the dirt floor cracked louder than it should have, a sound that felt like betrayal. Hands swarmed her, shoving her down, boots on her shoulders, cuffs locking cold around her wrists. She didn't resist, not yet. Because if she did, she'd be gone, and everything she'd seen, everything she knew, would be buried with her. They dragged her through the camp like a criminal. Soldiers stared, some wide-eyed, some whispering. A few turned away. She felt each gaze like a blade cutting deeper. Inside the command tent, the air was heavy with diesel, sweat, and silence. The glow of maps on the walls flickered over stone faces. Colonel Harkin stood at the head of the table, arms folded. His jaw was a slab of granite. Mendez stood to his right, bandaged where she'd elbowed him. Calm, composed. His eyes slid to her, cold and smug, as if daring her to speak. Explain yourself, Harkin said flatly. She swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. They're altering convoy logs, she said, splitting the routes. Someone's feeding them to the other side. I caught Mendez. That's a lie. Mendez's voice cut in before she finished. She's been obsessed for weeks, seeing ghosts, blaming everyone but herself. Her pulse spiked. I saw the pages there. They were scattered on the floor, Mendez interrupted again, because she planted them. A ripple went through the room. Someone muttered under their breath. Her stomach dropped. He wasn't just covering his tracks, he was framing her. Harkin's eyes narrowed. Sergeant, we've tolerated your concerns, but this, breaking into comms, assaulting an officer, that crosses the line. She shook her head violently. You don't understand. Harris saw it too, Harris is a boy. Mendez's tone was calm, almost gentle. He's scared, you manipulated him. Her breath caught. No. She looked around the room, searching for a single face that believed her. Nothing. Just silence. They locked her in the storage container at the edge of camp. The metal walls pressed in, hot and suffocating. The air reeked of oil and rust. She sat against the wall, wrists raw from the cuffs, head pounding. She thought of home, of her daughter's laugh, of promises whispered into the quiet of her bunk. I'll come back, she'd said. But what if she did? Her chest tightened. For the first time in years, tears threatened. She pressed them back with clenched teeth. This wasn't over. Couldn't be. Not when so many had died. Not when Convoy Charlie's silence still screamed in her ears. And not while Mendez stood free, wrapping his lies like wire around the truth. The door clanged open. Light spilled in, and a shadow filled it. Harris. His face was pale, eyes wide, a boy on the edge of breaking. They said I shouldn't talk to you, he whispered. She stood slowly, chains clinking. But you came. He nodded, trembling. I saw him, Harris said. His voice cracked, the words spilling out fast like he'd held them too long. Mendez told me if I didn't keep quiet, they'd say it was me. He said I'd go home in shame. Her breath caught. Relief and fury tangled in her chest. You can stop this, she said. Testify, tell Harkins what you saw. Harris shook his head violently. They won't believe me, I'm nothing. Her heart clenched. She saw the boy's fear, saw herself in it. They don't have to believe you, she said softly. Just one person has to hear, and then it spreads. That's how truth works. Quiet, patient, until it cracks everything open. His eyes glistened. He wanted to believe, but fear still held him. He glanced over his shoulder. I have to go. Before she could answer, he slipped away, the door clanging shut behind him, leaving her in darkness again. Hours passed, maybe minutes, time bent inside the container. Then distant shouting, a thud, boots pounding. Her pulse leapt. The door swung open again, light flooding in. This time it was Harris. It was Mendez. And he wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, rifles slung but hands steady. Mendez stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The container shrank, the air thickened. He crouched in front of her, face inches away. His breath smelled of coffee and iron. You should have left when you had the chance, he said. Her jaw clenched. You killed them, she whispered. Convoy Charlie, you signed their death. His eyes flickered. For a split second humanity cracked through. Guilt maybe, or shame. Then it hardened. They were numbers, he said. Expendable we all are. Her stomach twisted. The words tasted like rot. You're wrong, she said. Am I? He leaned closer. You think your daughter's name isn't on some list. You think you're not just another piece they'll throw away when you break. That's what this place is. That's what we are. Her breath shook, fury and fear colliding inside her. But beneath it, resolve burned. Not me, she said. Something in her tone made him pause, just for a second. Then he smirked, stood, and nodded to the men. Keep her here, in the morning we'll send her home. Dishonorable, forgotten. The door slammed, bolts locked. And for the first time she knew. They really were going to erase her. Unless she erased them first. That night she didn't sleep. She replayed every detail in her head. The roots, the binder, Harris's trembling confession. She traced each thread like wire, connecting one truth to the next. And when the plan took shape, it wasn't clean, it wasn't safe. But it was all she had left. The mission wasn't over. It was just beginning. Near dawn, the lock clicked. The door swung open again. This time it was Harris. Sweat slicked his brow, eyes darting. He held a keycard in his hand. "I can't let them do this to you," he whispered. Her chest surged. "You're sure?" she asked. He nodded, shaky but firm. "I'm done being afraid." For the first time in weeks, she almost smiled. Chains clattered as he freed her wrists. Her skin burned with freedom. The sun was just breaking over the desert as they slipped into the shadows between tents. The air was cool, laced with dust and diesel. Every step was a risk, every shadow a hunter. But her pulse was steady now. Because she wasn't running. She was hunting. And Mendez didn't know it yet. But his time had just run out. The desert dawn crept over the camp, pale and indifferent, as if it hadn't seen blood spilled here before. She moved low between shadows, Harris at her side, the sand cool under their boots. Every few steps she glanced back, pulse quick with the thought of floodlights swinging, rifles rising, orders shouted. But nothing yet. Not yet. "Where are we going?" Harris whispered. She kept her eyes forward, comms. His breath hitched. "That's the first place they'll check." "Exactly," she said. "They'll assume we wouldn't risk it." Silence stretched between them as they skirted the edge of the fuel depot. The air smelled of oil and heat. He swallowed. "And if we're wrong?" Her eyes narrowed. "Then we're ghosts." The comms tent loomed ahead, silent but alive with blinking green. She slipped inside, the air buzzing with static. Her fingers flew, flipping dials, yanking cords. She'd been here enough nights to know the rhythm of this place, the channels that mattered, the ones no one touched. And then she found it. A frequency logged at odd hours, outbound, scrambled. She pressed the headset to her ear. A voice hissed through, distorted but clear enough. Coordinates, routes, numbers that matched the ones she'd memorized. Her chest tightened. "Proof." She ripped the cassette from the deck and shoved it into her vest. Harris's voice was a tremor. "That's it, that's enough." She shook her head. "Not yet." Because voices could be dismissed, recordings faked, she needed the source. She needed to catch Mendez with his own hand on the wire. The tent flap rustled. She froze. Mendez stood in the doorway, eyes dark, lips curling slow. "I knew you couldn't stay put," he said. Her hand twitched toward her rifle, but his men were already behind him, rifles lifted, eyes hard. Harris swallowed audibly. "Drop it," Mendez ordered. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Harris. His eyes begged, "Don't." She let the rifle slip. The thud echoed like the last nail in her coffin. Mendez stepped closer, boots heavy on the dirt. His gaze flicked to the deck, then back to her. "You think you're clever," he said softly, "but you don't understand, you can't stop this." Her chest rose with sharp breaths. "Watch me." He almost smiled. Then he nodded. The butt of a rifle cracked against her skull, and darkness swallowed her whole. When she woke, the air was colder, the ground harder. Her wrists were bound again, tighter this time. Harris was beside her, blood streaking his cheek, eyes glassy. They weren't in the container anymore. They were outside the wire. Her breath caught. The desert stretched wide, endless, indifferent. And just beyond, 3 vehicles idled, their engines growling low. She understood instantly. They weren't going to court-martial her. They weren't sending her home. They were burying her. Mendez crouched in front of her, the wind tugging at his sleeves. "You should have walked away," he said. His voice was calm, almost kind. "Now you're just another casualty, lost in the desert, forgotten." Her jaw clenched. He leaned closer. But before you go, tell me, why couldn't you let it go? Her chest burned with fury and grief, and something deeper, defiance. Because someone had to remember them, she said. Convoy Charlie, all of them, someone had to care. For a flicker his eyes softened. Then they hardened again. Goodbye, Sergeant. He stood, gestured to his men. Two of them grabbed her arms, hauling her toward the ridge. The sand slid under her boots. The sky stretched wide above, pitiless. Harris stumbled beside her, shaking, whispering prayers under his breath. She felt the barrel press into her back. And for the first time she thought, this might be it. But fate doesn't always come with a bullet. Sometimes it comes with a roar. The sound tore across the desert, deep and violent, rotor blades. A helicopter. Mendez's men froze, heads snapping upward. The bird thundered low, kicking up sand, floodlights slicing across the ridge. Soldiers scrambled, shouting, rifles lifted toward the sky. Chaos cracked wide. She wrenched free, driving her shoulder into the man on her right. He stumbled. She ripped his sidearm free, slammed her elbow into the second. Harris dove low, scrambling for cover. Gunfire lit the dawn. Sand erupted around her feet. The helicopter swept across, a shadow and a savior both, its minigun rattling. Mendez shouted orders, but the wind ripped his voice away. She didn't wait. She ran. Her lungs burned as she tore down the ridge, sand clawing at her boots. The pistol weighed heavy but sure in her hand. Harris stumbled beside her, eyes wild. Where are we going? He shouted over the roar. She didn't answer, didn't have to. Because the cassette in her vest pressed against her ribs with every stride. The proof, the mission. And she wasn't letting it go. Not now, not ever. They reached the base of the ridge as the helicopter circled again, drawing fire away. Mendez's voice echoed faintly through the chaos, "Bring her back." But she was already gone. The desert swallowed her in Harris, the horizon opening wide like a door. They ran until their legs screamed, until the gunfire was only memory, until the wind was the only sound. And when they finally collapsed in the shadow of a rocky outcrop, chest heaving, blood sticky on her temple, she pressed the cassette into Harris's hand. "If I don't make it," she gasped, "you get this out, do you understand? You don't stop, not until the world knows." His eyes shone with fear and something else, resolve. "I won't stop," he whispered. She nodded, her body trembling but her heart steady. Because for the first time, she wasn't running for survival. She was running for the truth. And that made her unstoppable. The desert stretched ahead, endless and merciless. But somewhere out there was justice. And she'd walk through fire if she had to reach it. The desert had no mercy. By midday, the horizon rippled with heat, the air burning in her lungs. Her throat was raw, every swallow a blade. Harris stumbled beside her, his lips cracked, eyes sunken. The cassette in his fist looked absurdly small compared to the vast emptiness around them. And yet it was everything. The truth, the voices, the proof they had risked everything for. She glanced at him, "Keep moving." His legs wobbled. I can't." "Yes, you can." Her voice was harsh, but her hand steadied him, pulling him forward. "They're counting on us." He looked at her, eyes wet. "Why you? Why not just survive?" The question cut deep. Because survival wasn't enough, not anymore. She didn't answer, she couldn't. Instead, she pressed on. Hours blurred. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the sand. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by their ragged breaths and the crunch of boots. Then, faint at first, she heard it. Static. She froze, tilting her head. Not static, a signal. Her pulse surged. They crested a ridge, and there it was, an abandoned relay tower, skeletal against the dying sky. Rust ate at its frame, but the dish still pointed skyward, stubborn against the years. She almost laughed. Harris blinked at it, disbelief in his voice. "You think it works?" Her chest tightened. "We're about to find out." The inside stank of dust and decay. Broken panels, cracked screens, wires like veins spilling from walls. But in the corner, a console still hummed faintly. Her hands shook as she pried it open. Sweat stung her eyes, dust coating her tongue. Harris hovered behind her. "Can you fix it?" She didn't look back. "I don't have to, just enough to make it speak." Her fingers flew, reconnecting, bypassing, forcing life into old bones. And then the headset crackled. Her chest caught. She slammed the cassette in, rewound, hit play. Voices spilled out, coordinates, routes, the very proof Mendez had tried to bury. Her throat tightened. She keyed the mic, voice rough but clear. "This is Sergeant No. This is just a soldier out here with the dead, and this is the truth." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "They tried to send me home, tried to silence me, but I couldn't leave. Not while our own men were being sold, sent into traps. Convoy Charlie, Delta, every one of them. This is who did it. This is how." The recording played again, louder now, bleeding into the air. Harris stared, wide-eyed, as if watching history carve itself in real time. "Someone out there is listening," she whispered. "They have to be." Then shouts outside. Her blood froze. Mendez's men. Boots crunched over sand, rifles clicked. They had tracked them. Harris's eyes filled with terror. She pushed the cassette into his chest. "Run." He shook his head violently. "Not without you." "Run," she hissed. "You're the proof now. They won't stop both of us." Tears streaked his dusty cheeks, but his feet moved. He bolted through the far hatch, disappearing into the growing dark. The console crackled louder, her voice replaying again and again, echoing into the ether. And then the door burst open. Mendez stepped in. His face was shadowed, but his eyes burned. "You think anyone cares?" he spat. "You think truth matters out here?" Her chest heaved. She lifted the sidearm she'd taken earlier, arms steady despite the tremor in her bones. "They'll care enough," she said. Silence stretched between them. The hiss of static filled the space, her own recorded voice bleeding through the speakers, haunting and relentless. For a heartbeat, Mendez's jaw tightened. Then he raised his rifle. The world narrowed. Her breath slowed. She thought of her daughter, of promises whispered, of the silence she refused to leave behind. And she chose. The shot cracked. When the dust settled, the relay tower still hummed. Static whispered into the night. Her voice still played, stubborn and alive, carried on waves she would never see. Somewhere someone would hear. Harris was still running, clutching the cassette, the desert swallowing his tracks. And she was still. But not silent. Never silent. Because dignity doesn't beg, it doesn't plead. It simply stands and fights and leaves its mark. The desert wind rose, carrying the echo of her broadcast across the endless horizon. And though her body would fade into the sand, her truth would not. Her mission was done. Not because she survived, but because she refused to leave before it was.